like if that's step one, you don't even decide whether you're going to be a pasture grazer or a market gardener until like decision 4 or 5, right? You're sort of getting a
Sure.
hold of the water, figuring out how the
I follow you.
water dictates what you can do, and then also the flow patterns of just even the flow of whether you're going to be driving a full size combine or whether you're going to be a guy with a wheelbarrow going through small paddocks. That flow. Once you find out how the water moves and you start to heal that water cycle, it tells you how to move across the land in ways that aren't destructive and in ways that are on contour to help spread water even farther. I don't know if I'm making sense now or if I got off on that, but
You absolutely
just
are making sense. Like you're reading the landscape and you're receiving feedback. You're not trying to force fit what it is you want on the land. The land's gonna, otherwise if you try to force fit it, the land's gonna fight you every step of the way.
This is the Farm Hop Life Podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRosier. On the Farm Hop Life Podcast, we learn what it takes to grow your own food from everyday people. Could be a college student, grows tomatoes and salad greens on their apartment patio, a former VP of marketing for Del Taco now raising cattle in Montana, or someone who hasn't had a homestead in over 10 years. This show is aimed at teaching you what it takes to make homesteading work for you, that we all make mistakes, we all have bad days, but we can reach out and help one another thrive, and giving you the confidence needed to go feed yourself.
You're from the United States, but you moved to Canada to start farming, or can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah. Born and spent all my early life in Iowa, right in central Iowa. And I was trying to think there till I was essentially 35. And then I've just been up here in Southwest Ontario for the last 8 years now. We came in 2015. But I'd been traveling into Canada since the late 90s. And I met my wife, who's Canadian. She was down in Ames, Iowa with me for 12 years. And we were doing some things, subsistence farming on a friend's homestead, and grew some row crops down there for a few years just to feel things out and get some experience. Interacted with a lot of farmers down there. But then when it finally came to sort of where we're going to land, shortly after my daughter was born, we ended up here for sort of an assortment of reasons. And it's beautiful, and it's much like it's got a lot of characteristics of Iowa, both in the people and the landscape and those sorts of things. So I think it all translates, quite nice to. I will say I watch on Twitter some of the guys that are farther west and the drought issues that they deal with. I mean, I feel it's a good thing I came here. I didn't really know a lot about farming other than being immersed about it in Iowa. So I came to where it's pretty damn easy.
Sure.
It's lots of rain. And I mean, of course we have our challenges, but it's in a pretty beautiful, forgiving place with lots of water. And we're not far from Lake Erie, which, gives us access to that recreationally and all that stuff. So
Sure.
Happy to be here.
Did you pick that spot then knowing that you had good rainfall, or did you just luck into it?
I mean, certainly my eye was trained on those sorts of things as we were looking for places. I mean, we very nearly settled in a couple places in Iowa, and different projects kind of fell through or for one reason or another. And then my wife being Canadian, when it was like, okay, this is where we're going to land forever. She said, okay, we better broaden our horizons. And she even had some family links like in southern Manitoba, and we explored that a little bit. But I mean, really, that's like getting to be harsh land. And I mean, I love the prairies up there for various reasons, and been around there hunting and stuff. But go to USDA Zone 2, no thanks. We'll pick 5 and 6 down here. And then this area was just sort of a crapshoot now. So then my wife, she does have family that was sort of headquartered in Toronto. So we wanted to be towards that direction, but, might as well be on the U.S. side of it. So it ends up, we're about 2 hours from Detroit. If you're ever
that's not that far.
No. And if you're driving sort of like Michigan to New York, we've had friends coming from Iowa to New York, and it's just easy to sort of take the North Shore of Erie and stop in on us. It's we feel like we're right in the loop. You see those maps, if they were to ever redraw the countries, sort of, we'd be right in there in the Midwest, and it feels like it for many respects.
So you guys moved to Canada. So like you had farming experience in Iowa, and then you ended up moving to Canada to start your farm and like just hit the ground running, just farming, or you moved there for other work and then farming like on the side, and then the farming came in to like as like the full-time gig, or what's the deal?
Yeah. So yeah, we did hit the ground running, and we sort of knew that's where we were going. My wife and I both had at that point sort of semi-academic pasts, and my wife was sort of at the point as a recent PhD graduate, we could be chasing postdocs around or looking for tenure track positions, that sort of thing, and quickly said, no, we need to land somewhere more permanent. And so then the idea started to evolve of, the farm, of what that could be. And then really, I don't think we saw any of it coming exactly how it would. But we had our daughter, and sort of a year later, it sort of just became apparent to us that, somehow we needed to split those co-parenting things. And so, yeah, I had some gig work and things that followed me from Iowa that lasted for a while. And then my wife here sort of ended up inventing a position for herself that really matured well for a local nonprofit. That's pretty sweet
when that works out.
Yeah, for local nonprofit, it's not the greatest pay, but it's definitely been like, it's allowed her most of the day she works from home, and sort of between the two of us, somebody's always working and somebody's kind of, been handling the kid and other bits of life. And we just, we live frugally and make that work. And we've been fortunate in many ways too, that sort of make our life simple with respect to some family help to get here. And we actually invited my in-laws on, and they have a part-time home that we built on the farm, and just finished right as the pandemic was coming on in April 2020.
Wow.
And, yeah, so we've carved ourselves a nice niche for sure, and it's just been this balance of her working, and then, and kid taking tons of time, even though just one kid, can still be a handful, maybe even harder than having 5 or 6 that are helping to take care of them, but very much integrated life, so like doing chores slow because we were doing it with the kid along, those sorts of things, right?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar.
Yes. And, it's a lesson in patience. Been very fortunate sort of for what, the ability. So, yeah, long story. We've sort of been here, and it's never been like the grind to where the farm is going to sort of make or break us, and it's kind of like one season to make it or lose the mortgage sort of thing. With my wife's job and stuff, we've been able to make some mistakes and not sweat it too much, but learn a lot. And, and I think sort of gear up now we've got a lot of knowledge for kind of our next step, where we'll have more capacity because we don't have an infant tied to us and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And we're now trying to work on ways to bring her off the farm. So we do eventually want to shift it all to the farm, and we've had various philosophies. Try to at least make the farm. I've got lots of conservation practices, and we can talk about sort of pond building and swales and earthworks, and tried to always make the farm enterprises kind of pay for those sorts of projects, which are investments in the future. And then, pay insurance in Canada is, it's not great anywhere, but everything seems to be expensive here. So try to make the farm like carry its tax load and its insurance load, and pay for a whole whack of trees and some excavator time. And then that's kind of been where our dependence has ended so far.
Sure.
So
yeah, I'm sure the taxes up there are a whole different ball game. I'm sure.
We really lucked out. This place spoke to us in many ways, and we sort of coveted it for a while, and it ended up, I stayed at a friend's that was very near here. And then even the couple, like in the first postings of the house, they had a US and a Canadian flag, like flying from the flagpole. There was these weird symbols all along. And then so it's beautiful for many ways. And like, I was really hunting for specific topographies and stuff. And this place has lots of topography to play with for the things I like. And then lo and behold, we actually have this fraction of land because of our small forested areas, the area of natural and scientific interest. It pretty much zaps our taxes down to nothing. for the ag land. So it's been, I have friends I have friends very close to here who've been like fortunate to get big chunks of family ag land and just get brutalized by taxes. But then I've sort of wedged into where they're not great, but they're not too bad. I mean, I still pay like a residential rate on my 2-acre home footprint, and that's plenty.
Sure.
Yeah, super fortunate. You know, you need every like ace up your sleeve that you can get. So save yourself a couple $1,000 a year in taxes, I'll take it.
100%. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's hard-earned money right there. So
yeah,
stepping back a little bit, back to your time in Iowa, how did you get interested in like farming or homesteading or, you know, having a garden? Like, did you spend a lot of time with grandma or something?
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about that specifically, and you know, this through Twitter and these conversations, I've been thinking more about the word homesteading lately. Whereas I maybe hadn't for the last little while. I mean, it's always been a bit in my blood. My grandpa, he was, I grew up as a farm boy, but then ended up sort of after the war in a residential lot. But he sort of like grabbed himself with 3 lots on a corner. So he had this beautiful spread with a big garden and always had like these huge tomato plants and stuff. So it was always something that was with me for a long time. It didn't last long into my teens, as you know, grandparents tend to age and you know, I wish I'd seen a lot more of that garden and learned a lot more of that garden, especially I lost my grandma early. So now I look back, she was canning green beans and stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I love the green beans, but I didn't learn like how to can them and all her stuff. And so she went to Alzheimer's. So there's like, it's out there anyhow. So that was like, and then in my blood. And then I was born in the city, but my folks by my dad, and stepmother, then by kindergarten, they had gotten us out onto like a 3-acre property in a small town in sort of central Iowa. And so it was a great lifestyle there. Like, and then we had access to Army Corps land next to that. So it felt like we had, you know, access to the whole world, our little 3 acres. We could dive right into around Saylorville Lake. I forget where you're headquartered out there. I guess you bounce around. But if you've been through central Iowa, anyhow, we were butted right up to Saylorville Lake. And so then, like, I always knew from that, you know, my aspirations were always in acreage. And then it's always a conservationist, a hunter. And that sort of, I became sort of just trying to go through the arc of how I got here. Always interested in conservation, and that sort of got me into science. And I, like, long after high school, I was a delayed student into university, but I got sort of plugged into I did some ecology work. That's where I did lots of work on ducks and geese in various places in northern Canada. That's where I met my wife and sort of got, so all of a sudden, like I turned into like a professional interest in conservation, I should say. And then through that, like academics, that's where I got totally turned into agriculture and was just like, okay, all conservation needs to be ag. Like, holy shit, I'm in Iowa surrounded by corn and beans. It's the Black Desert. Fought against that a lot, sort of in my young 20s, just like hating the system, but then just kind of all that kind of just turns you back into, I guess I just got to go farm for myself and try to, you know, learn some of these things, but also just secure my own food because I don't trust the food system anymore. And I don't know, maybe I went through that arc too fast, but I think a lot of people sort of get there. So I don't want to belabor the point, right? But all of a sudden you're like, yeah, shit, I got to grow my own food.
Yeah.
And try to make something stick. And, you know, I keep going now. Suddenly it's like, you know, maybe there's not even going to be money when my daughter grows up. So orchards are better than money. How do you sort of invest and build sort of legacy and wealth that's going to be resilient to all the changes that seem to be coming, you know, that we couldn't even, they weren't even on the radar, sort of like trying to make a young life in the late 90s. Like even the last 3 years have been so crazy. The ratchet down, like, just makes you think more and more. Homesteading and resilience, and
it shifted a lot of priorities for a lot of people. That's for sure. Not sure if it's enough, but
well, and I was thinking about it a long time, and I feel very fortunate that we sort of moved when we did, because like prices were way different here. We have a 50-acre farm, and we bought it with a fairly new house. The house had only been built in 2008. We moved in 2015. I don't know if I just said that wrong previously. So fairly new house on 50 acres, and then now like just a little bitty lot with a much older house on it, basically just sold for the same price as what we bought this place for. So,
wow.
what would be, but like in Canada, definitely it's like really come up. But I'm sure everywhere there's a big exodus from the cities here. People are like, after COVID, get me out of the cities.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
Glad to be landed before that. Although Ontario was not great during the pandemic, so it makes you never know. You go for this big huge strategy, and then suddenly you're like, surrounded by communists. Maybe I picked the wrong spot, but maybe that's relaxing now. It's all these things you never thought about, or you need to think about when you're sort of anchoring down.
Are you just in that regard? Are you kind of second guessing the location, or you're like, I'm kind of dug in now? I'd hate to. I mean,
yes and no. Like, we're here. This is like my daughter's life. It's where she knows that we've got lots of like connection to the land, and actually got some really close friends around here. So no, we're here. Like pandemic times, especially like Ontario, the lockdowns were weird here, and people were weird in stores for a long time. And like, if you weren't compliant with all these things, like you might just get sort of like half the town was Karens that would literally start fighting with you, and there were just places you didn't go and whatever. But also very cool, like, and very polarized people around. Like, anyhow, there was a very tense place, and then also like couldn't go to restaurants and stuff, so it was very real that the things that you were suddenly cut off from for a long time here. So then you're like, shit, and Iowa they were pretty open. You're like, I moved away from Iowa to come here, but now it's relaxed, and but you just never know what's coming next. So this is where we are. This is where we're planting trees. I think if it ever came that our sort of financial portfolio was ready to invest in more land, it would be still a juggle, whether I was to try to buy like 100 acres here or even 100 acres somewhere else in Iowa, or what. Actually, I probably wouldn't go back to Iowa, but even here, like being here, like buying land in Michigan, so I could always jump ship and, at the very least be planting it out to trees, and it's only a few hours away, stewarding it, increasing the value. Like, we've built ponds and planted lots of trees here, and, we've added lots of value to the land. So, and for that matter, like I say Michigan, because I'm towards the Midwest, like I can be in upstate New York in 2 hours too. And so the same thing, we thought, could buy land there. My wife was in the U.S. she's a Canadian citizen, but she was in the U.S. for a dozen years, and we really thought we would stay there. So she's got citizenship, and she got citizenship in the U.S. My daughter is too, so we can very fluidly go back and forth.
I mean, if you're not that far from Detroit, just buy some property in Detroit. I think it's still cheap. I'm not really sure. I haven't
Exactly.
checked. And get yourself a boat. And so if anything gets bad, just go across Lake Erie and
yeah, it's right there. And even like
home.
So that's even Detroit's there, but we can go right across into Ohio. Would be straight across Lake Erie. I've definitely thought about maybe you think about resilience plans, like, okay, a boat, a nice War Eagle
or some scuba gear, submarine.
Exactly. You got to stack functions. So if you get a nice War Eagle duck boat that you can cruise across Lake Erie as a getaway, it's like double.
That is very Midwest, and I'm not sure anybody knows what you're talking about. But
no, probably not.
Being from Minnesota, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Amazing.
Yeah, those things get into so many road accidents. It's amazing that they're even street legal, but whatever. But yeah, you were talking about planting trees being kind of like a form of wealth. I mean, you talk about like appreciating assets, like that's one for sure.
Yeah, I think it's very overlooked. I was really starting to get my eyes open to that. Well, again, just a very concrete example, like of the value that's there. Like, I looked at buying 70 acres in Iowa, and we almost bought it. Other than it was way too narrow and just like very heavy conventional ag on both sides. And it was
probably get overspray.
I'm not sure you could ever grow a tree there, but it had a beautiful prairie remnant in it. but there was like a landlocked piece in the middle of that we were trying to get the guy to sell, or just like we would sort of like see if we could get it all in one piece, because actually the walnuts in that guy's, like, he basically planted a walnut orchard 40 years ago and just like was like, oh, my son was never interested, so we never went back there. And you could have paid for the whole place in walnut logs. And I've known some people that have done very well. Or I met, like, throughout my journey of just meeting, cool people in my young adulthood in Iowa, like people that had bought properties that way. And so then as you start to think about legacy, those folks were mostly cashing in on sort of existing walnuts, but
sure,
you could do that. You could, if you had in a lot of places in the US, if you plant the right forest trees in your 20s, it's probably going to be, and take time to prune them every few years, it's going to be one of the best portfolios you can have. If you had 20 acres of walnuts that you planted 60 years ago, you're going to be doing all right.
Yeah, that's true. Do pigs eat walnuts, or is it acorns? I can't remember which one.
Oh, they would rather eat acorns, but they will eat walnuts. And I was just picking that one. The black walnut's a beautiful wood, so the veneer, it's like really high quality veneer.
Yeah.
And then we're in a really good place for it. I honestly, now that we're talking about it, I probably haven't planted enough walnuts. I know there's authorities around here that say we sort of have some of the best and fastest, like, straightest walnut growth potential around here. So I don't. Everywhere there's little things like that to
You're just leaving money.
Exactly. Well, so much marginal land, right? Is so much places that we really beat up for crops could so much better just be put into these long legacy restoration projects, making wood.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting into how I found you. So somebody, we were talking about it very briefly before we started.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody made a tweet about, I'm sure, like agriculture or something like that. And did you take it personally? Like almost like a personal attack?
It was George Monabot, I'm pretty sure. And it was, I mean, that guy's just a lightning rod anyhow. So occasionally, if you're gonna be snarky to somebody on Twitter, it might as well be somebody that, somebody like that, not just a normal person out doing their thing. But he had just some picture of, some obliterated place being stomped to death by cattle, and saying, like, this is when a chef asks for a rotational graze meat, or pasture raised, this is really what you're getting. And, I've just come to know that pasture raised is a tool that can be very effective for, like, ecological restoration and production at the same time. And so at that time I happened to be going down, and I just had a beautiful vista where I would see my animals every day. And so I just snapped a picture in response to that.
I found it. I actually found
great.
it. Yeah. So right here. So George, whatever, like you said, more than 800 million Amazon trees felled in 6 years to meet beef demand. And who cares what he said? I was more interested in what you said. You just go, nope. This is what grass-fed means. Here you are looking out over a field that was row crops for 150 years. Now I've seeded it to prairie, restored 6 wetlands, and is grazed by sheep and cattle, and is full of wildlife. How many acres have you personally recovered, George? That was so awesome. The second I saw that, I'm like, I got to talk to this guy, like, right now.
Yeah. A bit snarky, like I said, only to George.
Hey, that's fine. He earned it.
Not everybody has to be doing that. I think everybody has a part to play in that. And I guess that's just, as I became a critic of agriculture, and especially in Iowa, that just means like corn and beans. And then, a big portion of what the corn is being used for is to feed cows. And so it's like the whole system of, putting protein and oils on the plates of people is kind of the name of the game for the landscape. And so, when you try to go counter to that system, you start thinking of ways that you can have the same outputs, protein and oils, and in a sort of more regenerative way. And I know, not everybody's doing what I'm doing, and I don't certainly have it optimized to where it's the best system. And but I do know grazers that are doing, a lot better than sort of what George was portraying there. And
that was a pretty hard flex, though. You're just it was pretty impressive. So
it's the problem with the anti-beef movement is that I do think, like, in the overall arch of, however, so I'll step back. I agree with lots of these folks in that we need to, like, redefine the way that we produce our food. And, but when the stance like that goes to sort of like trying to exclude animals, I think it's like very much a proponent that sort of any new agriculture or tweaks or whatever you want to say, although we need to be coming up with, we need to totally revision where our calories are coming from, like on a continental basis. But that way it has to have our animal allies and has to be integrated crops and livestock. And so sort of it's worse than kind of the baby out with the bathwater to sort of, say, hey, and, I take it, I don't get into those conversations a lot. And I know George is sort of a blowhard, so I usually let him go. I actually used to sort of respect some of his writing, but everything, the fractions have gone so big, and like people on both sides have just gone crazy. But especially on that side, like now he's, totally like the no farms movement and all these crazy things. When I think, like, not only of course we need farms to raise our food, but also like we have a lot of healing work to do. And I think the farms are the way to do the healing. And so, I don't know how George plans to put it back together, but I think we need to actively work with our animal allies, the grazers, to regenerate the place. And,
what steps have you taken to do the healing of your land? Like you were talking about swales and like silvopastures earlier.
Yeah. I think in one of the general senses, like even from kind of planetary scale and all the way down to anybody's field, is like the first thing you need to do is like work to restore and heal the water cycles. And with respect to kind of the conventional ag that I see and critique, and then also that was the legacy of the land before I was here, it's just land that's sort of been worked pretty hard, has like a infrastructure of subsurface drainage, which sort of, even like as a practitioner here on the land, is the bane of my existence. Like I have projects being subverted and I know I'm losing water in still many places. But, trying to recapture some of those cycles. So essentially the tile's all kind of running to get the water off your property as fast as possible. So I'm doing things that are almost, perpendicle to that, where anywhere they want the water running downhill, I'm trying to get it running sideways. And so I mentioned before, I've sought a property with topography to play with in that sense. And so I just have, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this out, just taking a moment to just describe the land. Say my farm is 50 acres and it's got 15 acres of sort of cleared arable land in a top portion that's accessible by a road. And then there's kind of a C shape of 20 acres of woodland that also has quite a big relief difference and goes downhill 120, 150 feet into a bottom 15 acre cleared field that is flatter. And it's like the alluvial plain of a mid-sized river that's a little bit off, that's on my neighbor's property. So, but it would have been the historical 500-year floodplain or whatever. So it's flat, the bottom ground.
Sure.
And so my top ground is sort of has ridge lines anyhow, where we can do things like build swales. I know there's a design technique, key line design, whereby you sort of have a formula for intercepting the water before it gets to have erosive and destructive power, and kind of turning it from running downhill to running mostly across the hill. And so because my home was already built on this property before I got here, and it's kind of in the middle of where things could be, I actually was able to take all the water from the home and send it into a swale that sort of used to just be going down through what was the cornfield, and sort of the same old goalie that was always in the cornfield was now getting worse because the people had lived here for 7 years and had a 50 feet of tile line, but then just sort of kicked it out into what they had seeded down into horse pasture. But the same old pattern as always, right? There's old legacy ag tile underneath of it as well. So I've just taken that and turned it, and I run it now around. Since then, I built a pond in my backyard, and I built a terrace below that so that I can overflow the pond in the wet season. And it has two choices. Like if the pond is full, it can just go into the forested valley where the water normally would have gone before. Or I can send it into a terrace, and it sort of wraps around the farm, like 750 yards, both of those, this sort of swale and terrace, just as ways to move water along. And then by way of that's sort of the keyline design, then that kind of, those features set the whole pattern. So if we go back to saying, what do you do when you're at when you get a place and I say you need to heal the water cycles, it's sort of like subverting those erosive forces. And then typically in identifying those and finding out how to deal with those better, it sort of lays out the whole pattern and template for the whole farm. So you do that first, and then like if that's step one, you don't even decide whether you're going to be a pasture grazer or a market gardener until like decision 4 or 5, right? You're sort of getting a hold of the water, figuring out how the water dictates what you can do, and then also the flow patterns of just even the flow of whether you're going to be driving a full-size combine or whether you're going to be a guy with a wheelbarrow going through small paddocks. That flow, once you find out how the water moves and you start to heal that water cycle, it tells you how to move across the land in ways that aren't destructive and in ways that are on contour to help spread water even farther. I don't know if I'm making sense now or if I got off on that, but
you absolutely are making sense. Like you're reading the landscape and you're receiving feedback. You're not trying to force fit what it is you want on the land. The land's gonna, otherwise if you try to force fit it, the land's gonna fight you every step of the way.
Yeah, it's like, so in a hilly land, like there's kind of a great example, and I've seen this several times. And then on a hilly place, oftentimes we find the roadways to be straight up and down the hills, and those sort of will exacerbate erosion.
Yes.
And rows being made in those patterns are going to do the same in the field. But then like a lot of times, but people would say like, okay, so we'll go the other direction. And then if you just turn everything perpendicular, maybe water stacks up behind your garden, and then you get blowouts and things are too soggy for so long. So, okay, so then, like, that's not quite right yet. But everything like in the keyline pattern ends up being like, say 1 to 4% kind of off grade. And then suddenly in the places where I'm driving my side-by-side Kubota and leaving little ruts, just because the nature of driving a semi-heavy equipment across the field, or your wheelbarrow or your big tractor, well, suddenly those are like very gentle flow paths for water. And so like instead of my tractor being like this agent of compaction and causing concentration of water, I'm actually can use the natural flow of the farm to help spread that water. But you sort of don't, you have to go to the water first, or else. To me, that's the key of it. In other places, there's maybe water isn't so destructive always, and there's just other key things like storing it. But where I am, it's like it's a balance of both like keeping the water, but then also like really trying to minimize the erosion. I guess that's where I come at it first too, is just take out that erosive force of the water, and then after that, if I can hold on to some of it, we do. And so I've built a series of small ponds. Again, you work with what you've got, and we're a fairly small farm, and so like we haven't built any big expansive wetlands, but everywhere where the sort of the natural landscape allows us to, and the law allows us to, trying to hold water for as long as we can, and just get it back into the earth, let our plants have it.
So when you move to your property, did you do a bunch of earthworks before you even got animals, like any livestock?
No, I made myself. So it's really easy to come into all these things like super gung ho, and that's definitely kind of my personality, and even like, and especially so my previous personality. I've really kind of used these last 8 years to ground myself and mellow out a little bit. But somebody, I'm sure, from the permaculture had got drilled into my head. Sort of don't just take a year to observe. You don't know the place, even if you think you know the place. I know more now. I don't necessarily think that's 100% necessary, but I learned about that, every time it was raining, just get out and walk around, and you can really easily do things wrong. For instance, had I gone out and just like built swales everywhere I wanted to, I probably would have done one on a sandy slope that I have I have one really sandy lens, and it probably would be a freaking disaster. And it's maybe not needed anyhow because there's good infiltration and the water's not really running along there. I've done some other soil building techniques there, but, kind of had to get to know the place before that. And then like early on in that sort of session of learning, I did do a few things. We built our first swale, and I think it turned out all right. I would do some things again, and I almost would like to sort of get in there maybe and change some things with an excavator here eventually sometime, just with respect to sort of how we travel through it. But then I got in with I don't know if you've ever come across Zach Weiss in the permaculture world. He's sort of a water
Name
guru.
sounds familiar.
He worked under permaculturalist Sepp Holzer.
Yes.
Anyhow, he's a water savant. Had a really excellent time. I was fortunate enough to work with him when he was like, I think his career was slow enough that I got a lot of time with him, and he came and stayed with us. And I learned a lot with him, sort of crawling over the land. And when he was here, we brought in a small excavator and dug test slices all over. So that's another nice thing to do, to just like to really get a sense. I think we dug 13 or 14 test slices, like down to 12 feet deep, just to get the soil profile and to know what you could do at any given place to really have a solid plan. And you never know till you're getting in there, especially some of these ag soils have been disturbed lots of times and what have you. I've got some places that actually at 12 feet, we still can't get down deep enough to know what like the parent material is, because it's kind of been silted in and dredged out, those sorts of things.
Sure. Right.
So I guess that's to say I didn't get in there heavy with the earthworks right away. Some things now I wish I had done faster, but then we were right away in with the animals. Like we got here on May 1st, and I think our first batch of chickens were, here by the end of the month. And actually through word of mouth, and like had a milk cow and her calf and a steer that I didn't really want, but he came with the two with the 2 cows and 4 pigs, like before solstice. So within 50 days of being here on the farm, sort of, there's a little bit of horse infrastructure, so we were able to cobble together some fencing. And when I moved the moving truck up from Iowa, I filled it full of fencing materials, knowing that it was cheaper in the States to get started. And so I came in with my charger and several big reels and posts and stuff. And so, we just hit the ground running and sort of like spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, learn some things. Which I'm totally an advocate for. Like some people, there's like the two schools of thought, just like go at it, or like start things and get really good at chickens, and then the next year take on turkeys or something. We didn't do chickens and turkeys together, but I'm a fan of just like starting fires and then just try to keep them under control, and within reason, I suppose. But
right.
Like we just learned a lot. And for instance, like we've been here 8 years. We came into pasture pigs. I was really interested in pasture pigs, and we had had a few sows going, and we're marketing 25, 30 pigs a year. And now I'm down to just a couple. I buy in some weaners from the local Amish and use them for a few personal customers and my own meat. And something I could love to try again. And I've learned lots from them, and they actually did a lot of good in the places that I worked them. Like I don't lament having them. There's a few rough places. I learned a lot from them. I'd be happy to bring them on. I could have more confidence of like starting a solid pasture pork enterprise in the next few years because of that knowledge with them. But like it sort of didn't work out, and I probably lost money on it. So it's one of those things. Should I have not done a lot about it? Be in love with pigs, know how to keep them fenced in, and if I ever really want to get into a big pasture pork market, like feel pretty confident that I could put the capital investment into infrastructure, buy my animals, and be like going with solid knowledge of pigs. So those sorts of things. Not everything sticks, but you learn a lot from all of it.
Yeah.
We had a dairy cow for many years, and just like life was sort of getting too busy. And she was hard to get pregnant. And so we sort of moved out of cows, but then like I've got a new one ordered from the Amish that would pick up in September,
Hey, nice.
Back into it. Like we very much, it was, sort of trial by fire. Actually I'll spare you the stories, but she came sort of wrangly and we had fun. My first time ever milking a cow's first time ever being milked long after she should have been milked. But now I recognize it as like a critical part of sort of being resilient on the homestead and having access to all the calories and stuff. Now I just buy Amish raw milk, which is still fairly cheap, but I want a cow back, that sort of thing. So
the cattle, like do you have cows now? You do have cows now, right?
I just butchered our last cow, but we're in this in-between spot, and then we're bringing back on in September, at least this Jersey, and then hopefully more. So I swung into sheep. I have more sheep now, and a little bit of a cattle interim. But then hopefully in 2025, my neighbor's hay lease is up, and then we're going to get back into cows big time again. So that's one of the things. We've had as many as like 3 cow-calf pairs on the farm and finishing, 3 or 4 cows a year. It's one of these interesting things with the water. A lot of the water works, like my fields now that I've got swales and terraces, things are so wet that like in my sort of immediate area, I've really found sheep to be sort of more amenable immediately, but we're working on getting my neighbor's field transitioned over. It was in row crops, and then to get it transitioned over, he's put it into hay for 5 years, and then we're going to be back onto it with beef.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And then I've got another neighbor that I do bring beef through. My lower fields are heavy grassland, our prairie grasslands. And so then we push his beef through here too as well. But right here, not on our farm for the moment.
So when you had the cattle and the sheep, did you run them together or were they separate and like rotationally graze them?
Usually together. I tried different things. I tried for a while, like when I had if I'd have a dairy cow, I'd get her into the pasture maybe 12 hours earlier, and then I would let the sheep in and let them have it for a day, and then have like a few steers or even a heifer calf behind them, sort of just like to clean up all the grass and to not necessarily be worried about putting the first 2 batches of animals being lactating. But then I switch them. And so like I don't castrate my sheep. And so here soon I'll have to split the males and females apart. And then I just run the males run the cows and the ram lambs all together. And I never had any problem with that. Actually, what I do often, if they're together, I'll end up doing, I either run my sheep on polynet early in the year, and then I go to just wire when they're a little bit bigger later in the year. But I've got a lot of the cow pigtails that just have a single strand. And so oftentimes I'll subdivide a paddock to where the cows only have part of that, and the sheep can still get to a place where the cows can't get to.
Mm.
I find maybe they do sometimes get a little rambunctious and chase each other around, and will chase each other through the fence, that sort of thing. But I think most of the times when I have problems with that, it's the fact that I have everything so dense. It's really that's a learning process of like rotational grazing. Is everybody's like, oh, high density rotational grazing. Well, if you only have even 6 cows and 20 sheep, and you really have them like dense enough to be like high density rotational grazing, they're pretty tight on each other and maybe not a lot of room to move. And so then you end up opening them up so they're more comfortable with each other, and but maybe don't have the density of grazing that I want out of it. So that's where I've been trying to like play with, get over it a couple times with a couple sets of animals, or if they're better all at once, or
Right.
it's so hard figuring out. I mean, that's why I just feel like getting things and trying it is like the best, is all you can do and see what works. Like right now I've just been pondering the grass. It was really wet early this year, and then we didn't get any rain for a long time. But the grass grew really well, and we had some hot periods. And so like the grass got way ahead of everything. So I'm doing my pretty intensive rotational grazing with the sheep, but then I have 2 rams that I haven't been moving them as much. And like, there's a couple places where there's big vetch and clover patches next to them. So I'll just leave them in a paddock longer than I normally would and throw them stuff over the fence every day to kind of keep them going without a rotation. Well, then I pull them off of a place that, they've been into, way too long, and like over the 3 days or whatever, that have like getting their 3rd bite kind of thing and damaging the pasture. Like how those pastures look great now because they really beat the crap out of the grass, but the clover is still fine. And so, it's just, it's always learning.
Okay. I do have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned sheep and clover. I thought sheep could easily overgraze on clover and die. Is that right? They bloat easier or something like that?
Bloat is a thing for sure. We've never seen anything like that in ours. So we run Katahdins, which are generally known to just be pretty hardy and sort of out there and grazing, and even have like a little bit of, people say a little bit of goatish to them. I don't see them eating more roughage necessarily, but they will sort of expand out. So I think if you had them on lots of roughage and then you just like turn them out into a full pasture of clover and they just went crazy, you could probably run into a problem. If I've ever had to do that, because of the fear of the clover, like I maybe would supplement them with a little bit of dry hay just so that they can sort of self-select that. And I don't have that problem too much where my pastures are too clovery, but I've never seen anything like that. I think it can happen. I think the dry is a good trick, and I always tried to do that it's just like easing them onto the pastures and sort of making sure. It's always a balance too. And again, just why you just have to sort of do it of like getting out there too early and beating up your pastures, or holding them back when it's green on the other side of the fence and they just want to break the fence down because they're like, why the hell aren't you letting me have that grass on April 25th or whatever? Yeah, I find I really follow, see if I can come up with his name. Like the animal nutritionist that just talks about, it will come to me. I'm terrible with names, but it'll come in a minute. Like animals' ability to self-select. And so if you just give them lots of diversity,
Right.
That you really aren't going to get into problems. Even with respect to like putting animals in the woods in places, which needs to be a balancing act for many reasons, but like they might have exposure to a fern that could be deadly. But if you're not leaving them there till that fern is like the last thing to eat and they're just hungry and they're like, fuck it, like the fern, they're probably going to avoid it. And I see that a lot with my animals. And Fred Provenza is the gentleman.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Researcher out of Idaho. And I've seen him at several farm conferences, and really fascinating stuff, but basically just says, these animals can figure it out on their own. And I see that like certain plants I'll give them and they'll like eat it for one day, like hawthorn's one. They'll just like gorge on it the first time I give it to them in the season. and then they won't really touch it again until later. And they just like want that one dose. But it sort of tells me that, you know, there's probably something out there that they want occasionally. And then so when it comes, like, I'll save things like that for the winter and just expose it to them. And, you know, if things get harsh, throw out a variety of things and see what they might want out of it. But, and then I think they avoid all the things like poison and bloat and those things pretty well.
Do you have any, I'd say, for lack of a better term, like formal, like training? Like, did you take a PDC or did you just train with Zach? Was it Zach Weiss? Is that what you said?
Yep. I wouldn't so much say I trained with him. He came for a consult and then came back and did a project here. So I had 2 good stints with him, like right on my land, and I really could learn a lot from him. No. But so I went through an undergraduate degree in ecology and wildlife, and then did a master's in sustainable agriculture. And like through that training and that, like my master's, I had several really interesting classes where we just got to travel like all over and see all sorts of agriculture, everything from big, like, you know, going through a big JBS plant that's butchering like tons of pigs in a day, to, like, you know, Amish operations and all these things. So like I'd really done some, I guess I'll say, like a study in like getting a big snapshot of all these things in agriculture. And then after that sort of formal academic work, I went and worked with a group in Iowa called Practical Farmers of Iowa, and small nonprofit, getting bigger all the time. But you know, it gave me lots of exposure to farmers, and there was lots of learning opportunities there. And then I sort of had he was a coworker actually at PFI, but we got to be good friends. And I did several years of gardening with him on his place, and he had a market garden, and he was really a mentor on how to do a lot of things, and not necessarily permaculture, but I started reading lots of that stuff, but again, I never really studied it formally. But I studied ecology formally, and then you just read about permaculture, and all sort of makes sense, sort of identifying patterns and processes on the land, and bringing them into your planning.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious because it just sounds like you have like this, like a pretty good like depth of knowledge on these systems. So
yeah, I was able to dabble in lots of these things sort of in different ways in my life. And even like when in university, for instance, I took like, you know, a wetland and like pond planning course or whatever. And just I had a really interesting, won't go into it, but I kind of like, I dropped out of university when I was young, and I came back. And because of that, like my whole catalog that I chose from was gone. But they just said, if you want to stay in your old track or whatever, just do what you want. And so I got to take like all sorts of very interesting classes, and it really let me sort of like make this arc. Like I started like in all my wildlife classes, and by the end I was taking like pond design and landscape architecture. And
I'm going to hit you up for a pond design then, because I need one bad.
It's I mean, I haven't honed all those things, but it's definitely, I've been exposed to them, and for sure it's fun to talk about. And there's some great guys that are doing things to depict the pond teachings and stuff now. Like I'd love to even do like some more of, is it Andrew Mollison that does like the online permaculture courses? Like there's good stuff out there. But yeah,
I'm assuming that's Bill's son or something.
Don't trust me on names at all.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So what would you say has been the biggest challenge in farming that you faced?
Yeah. I mean, trying to make it all work, really, you know, just every piece of it is sort of bigger and more complicated than kind of you realize when you're first getting in. And even like I've been around farming and worked for farmers growing up and stuff, so I understand some of the things and the size of things. But you know, it's like I can just think back how many times I was shocked, like, holy shit, that trailer's like got a lot of chickens on it. Like once you get it loaded up at 4 a.m, you're starting to do the math. Like, 300 times 9 or whatever it might be, you know, and you sort of hit these things where you just like, as you're incrementally getting up there, it doesn't feel like anything. And then you're just like, the scale of these things hit you, or like, you know, the first I beat up one small pickup truck here, and then just like just buying feed from the Amish, you know, and all of a sudden they drop like, oh, we made this one a little heavy. It's, you know, 3,000 pounds. And they like drop it on the trailer, and then you're off and going. And it's like those scale of things really start to hit you, right? When you're like watching Justin Rhodes and you're like, I'm going to be a chicken farmer. It's like, better be able to hump some feed bags around, right? And
right.
And loading chicken crates at the end of the day, at the, you know, at night, going to the morning, going to the abattoir and stuff. Like those realities, like freezer space hit me all the freaking time. It would never seem to, I'd get ahead in my meat business one year, and then the next year it'd be like, all right, I guess we have 2 cows and 3 pigs and chickens are all being butchered next month. And you're like, you know, I was like, it's seriously been the joke. We've sort of backed down, like I said, we're in this wave between the cows right now. Like the freezers are not as sort of as full. And it's kind of not, it's not cows that are coming through here. It's like, it's been the running joke for 8 years. Like a successful end of the meat day is like the freezer closes, right? Where it's just like, make sure everything's safe. Like even at you know, and you're like, you're worried if if enough customers are going to come buy fresh chickens in order for the freezer to close, or the multiple freezers to close. So just these realities that like, and it's funny because it's like I just kept hitting these ceilings with like moving stuff. It's like the physical scale of things. You know, the larger the sort of money gets, like sort of the capital outlay for different things, and whether that's you go from raising 60 chickens to like we were up to a couple thousand chickens. And so like those cohorts are much bigger. If you're raising 800 chickens in a cohort, like you have a lot of feed on the line. If like a raccoon was to come in there, it's like it's a much bigger loss than if you got your like 30 chickens in a chicken tractor and that sort of thing. Right. And then stretching that into like putting hay into a cow for 2 seasons before. And it's like those realities of, are I'd say sort of one of the bigger lessons. And I mean, they should seem obvious and it's all could pencil out, but you don't really, from the sort of homesteader scale of things, it's, I don't think everybody's really prepared for that. And I wasn't necessarily, you know, but you work into it. Now I went many years trying to decide which tractor to buy. And I don't use a tractor for a lot of things, with respect to like most of its implements, and had a tractor I could rent from cheap from a neighbor. So I never was pushed really for several years. And then we ended up with a track loader. So now I realized like moving things, water, materials.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I do here, right? Like I don't turn a PTO, I move things. And so got now like the best equipment for sort of moving things. Cause you realize like, it's, you know, I move wire, I move buckets, I move things, right? And those are sort of some of the limiting things. You know, the scale and weight of water, that's another one. Like we're obviously working to put water resources on the ground, but there's been times like when I scale in cattle and I didn't realize what I was doing to my well, like suddenly, you know, hot and dry, my second year here, my well went dry. Whenever,
geez.
There's places around here that you can't pump the water out, but I'm in a little lens here where it's actually quite precarious. Like the wells suck, but then I've got springs springing out everywhere, right? So it's like it's a balance of resources. It's not that I'm dry, but you know, the spring's shooting out in the middle of the forest. It's not a lot of good to you, right? You're driving down to the guy with the pump and hauling back water. You're not going to your own woods or whatever it might be. It's like hitting those realities of like, okay, now I got to haul 8,000 pounds of water. Like, how do you do it?
There's a lot of weight. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
on the flip side,
yeah.
Go ahead. Finish.
No, just say so. Those have been sort of the lessons. There's lots of parts of like trying to figure the economics out and those sorts of things too. But I sort of almost feel those are like ancillary. Like ecology and physical reality are kind of trump the profit in mine, and then I'm maybe much to my wife's dismay, but that's like third on my list.
Don't tell her that. Don't let her listen to this.
She knows it's true. No.
I was going to say, on the flip side, what's the best part about farming?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pushed to like think back to where we started about like there's a real need for systems change. And I think like homesteaders are in this really cool place where we're like playing with these systems that really need to be changed. And maybe it's a technology where people are like on the edge, but and I don't mean to be like self-important because it's certainly not me, but just in general, like we definitely need as a society to like rethink our relationship with the land. And that means like farming and our own personal relationships with the land and where non-farmers get their food. And so it's a very real place where we're like in this like really could be potentially like curiosity driven and important place of innovation. And even if it's like, I don't think it's going to be me necessarily, but just like figuring out how these ecologies work and even like awakening ecologies and sort of engaging animals and all these things. So like, I think it's just really neat to be in this sphere and sort of working with these things. And, I guess we've kind of talked about a lot of the little parts, but like when it all comes together, you've got like ponds and tree lines and you're sort of moving your animals between trees and trying to balance, chasing the grass and waiting for it and hoping it rains and looking for where it's too wet. All these things are just like, we really get to weave together like basically a novel ecosystem that I don't really think people have really done yet. Like some sort of indigenous groups have done it. And I think there's like legacy European systems that people have done, but I don't think we've really like done it well as a society in North America. Like we sort of came and had like blitzkrieg mentality and we've just kind of been like living off the fat of the land for many years. It was just like living off the fat of the land. And then there were obviously like cycles like the Depression and depletion where it really caught up with us, but we actually still were like able to plow through that. Right. And it's like a lot of modern agriculture is like sort of,
sure.
It's like going by sheer momentum of itself. And like, we don't know where the limits are, but we have a need. And so just like playing with that as a homesteader is really freaking cool. And so like, I feel really fortunate, just our balance. And even though it's like, it's changing now and financially for us, and we're, focusing on different things, but it's like, just, getting sort of this like ecological engine moving and sort of working with it and like being able to sit back now and trying to think of like, as we go forward, when we would have come here 8 years ago, it's like, how do we want to make our living? Like, am I going to be a chicken farmer? Am I going to be a pork farmer? And now like we've sort of had the time here and we've been able to like step back and sort of work with the place and have these different things. So we have knowledge going. And I think the land sort of like knows that we're working with it. And so now it's like, we're getting a sense of like, what's going to work here because this is what the land is going to help us work with too. Right. It's not like
right.
all self-imposed. And I'm not saying I'm like perfectly tuned in and like channeling the land, but I can also see what works and we can just sense.
Because you're aware and looking for that feedback. So then you can see, your ears are tuned more so.
Yeah. And it's to everything. It's the whole environment. Yeah. It's like us here. And then it's like, also, I say that and I want to just make sure I put into it's like, we felt out the markets and those sorts of things. And so we know like what's going to go. I'll add one thing I just want to make sure that I brought in, and maybe this is not the appropriate time, but I think it's like a really interesting point to pass on to people. And it's been like important to us. When I was working with Zach, he sort of made the point that because he's worked with lots of farmers in lots of areas, third world and Europe and Asia and here in North America. And he always said like his sort of reflected one time and said like, he often finds that the people that are just growing food, like sometimes struggle and it's a grind, but the people that sort of like find and get into and like are providing medicine to their community, that's like a link that really sort of is, it's just important for the farm. Like it's profitable, it's powerful, it's got all these things. And so like I can feel that working. And my wife's, for instance, she's working on like a skincare line based on the tallow, just of grass-fed tallow, because it's just, you know, it's medicine, right? And so
right.
I don't know. I bring that up because it's like, I think it's powerful because, I mean, first off, medicine has like so many different connotations. And I mean, I think he really means like, he knows people in Montana growing America, and that's like freaking better than growing carrots because there's a lot more money in it.
Can you repeat that last part? You cut out just a little bit.
Oh, just to make the analogy, like it could be so simple as like somebody in Montana growing arnica versus is going to be a high dollar crop versus growing carrots, which is going to be a low dollar crop. So there's like even right there. But then also I feel like this idea of medicine, like now if we can like be taking our products like beef tallow, which maybe have been like thrown away before, and now it's like can be used as a skin product. I mean, we don't throw it away, but it's even really hard to like make sure you get it back from the abattoir and all those things. You know, if it can nourish people, it can be both value added and good for the farm.
Right. Like let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food type thing.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that for sure. And just so as your view your farm products is that, right? Like it's really hard to just be a carrot farmer because carrots are cheap, but growing both nutrient dense foods and then just also, yeah, these sort of deeper medicines, I think is important.
I've got a note in here about Taoism. Are you into Taoism? Is that?
Yeah, Taoism. I would say I was, and I was just brainstorming. You said, "Hey, what are some other questions?" And I was just throwing that out there. It's been something I've always really thought really dovetails nicely with sort of regenerative ag and stuff. I don't necessarily.
Sorry, are you saying Taoism or Taoism?
I say Taoism. I think you could say either. People do it with a T.
I thought they were different. I'm not. It's been a while since world religions or whatever.
No. So there's two things. So there's some people do it with a D, some people do it with a T, and there is like one formal sense which was like formalized as a religion. And I'm not really interested in that. I'm like the Taoism I just sort of threw out there is more just like the fact that the universe is just like flowing around us, and there's so many things that people could do that could just, you know, you can go with the flow of the stream or you can go against the flow. And I think like especially when I was more tuned into sort of Facebook groups and things related to homesteading and regenerative ag, like it's so easy to just beat your head against the stream, and it's really hard on people. And I see people just grinding themselves out. And I think this lifestyle is really a way to just like tap into the flow and take things easy. Like we're so blessed to be able to like on the farm to access silence as long as you sit down and make time for it and sort of have the universe, you know, giving you signals and whatever. I mean, I don't want to be like, it's not even woo woo. It's just like whatever, tapping into your own intuition, having patience to wait. You know, there are so many things that just like, you want to rush into, like, and there's like a Taoist saying, like a modern Taoist saying, it's like, if you have a good idea, like you need to go fishing. Absolutely. The worst thing you should do is act on it. Like if you're on the homestead and you're like, oh sweet, I just got a great idea for a chicken coop. Like, do not go build it. Like, go fishing. Put it out of your mind or think about it. Let it ruminate. And I see, like, I've spent so much money and wasted so much money in the past. Like my garage is like an assortment of, or my like barn shop of like baggies of projects that I'm just like, I'm going to do. Like went and bought the shit. And like, once I let it settle, some things I never did it, but I actually, it's like, I don't lament it. It's just like, what I lament is I spent the money on that thing that I obviously didn't need to spend the money on because somehow that problem either came up with another solution or and
or wasn't a problem anymore magically.
Yeah. And there are so many things. And then it also just takes, I don't know how much you want to go off on this or how much you were like shooting for with that question, but there's so many things that just like, it's real easy to like beat yourself up in farming and even like you have catastrophes and those sorts of things. And like, so just to get a sense of Taoism, I'll just tell you like a little Taoist parable, and there's like trying to think of how it goes. And, I'm trying to think of how it starts, damn it.
Well, you think of it. I was just gonna say, I was just curious how Taoism played into your farming life. So, like, how the two like mesh together, and I'm glad that we went there because
Yes.
I was curious about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think essentially Taoism, to take a step back to, is like people call it like. There's Alan Watts, who was a big philosopher that talked about it. And he's like the water course way. And it's just like the way that the flow of things and the sort of the flow of the universe is going along like the flow of water. And so then I think that matches nicely with ecological agriculture, because I don't want to just be a chicken farmer and I don't really want to just be a grazer. But if I'm doing like those two things, there could be ways that they like are butting heads. Or there may be ways that they could like mesh together more like what would be the term, like syntropically, like, right, they just come together and work as a flow. And so like in the farm, it's not only like trying to avoid the things that you can see like beating heads against each other, but then also trying to like identify these places where like, hey, there's a niche space where I like something could happen right there. And it might supply, like I needed a windbreak. And so like I have mulberry windbreak next to where I have the chickens. And so then like the chickens are getting all the mulberries and these things, right? That's maybe not the greatest example, but just looking where you can have synergies versus things that are butting head or, in turbulence. Like another Taoist principle, there was a term in Taoism called like Wu Wei, and it's sort of just like effortless action. But one thing that sort of comes out of that is this idea that like if nothing is done, nothing is undone. And so that can go to farming. Like right now, I have a very precarious goose situation. The geese were driving me crazy. Freaking shoved them in a chicken tractor. They go through their water. I fill their water morning and night. That's like, it's sort of a hobby. I'm trying to figure out where geese I'm bringing them on. I just have 2 clutches. But that's very precarious because I've added myself a water chore twice a day. Like if I don't do that water chore, they freaking die in there, right? Like miss it for a day or 2. And you can think about that with anything. It can be a chicken watering system. But if I can have, like I did this spring, but I've just changed it. Otherwise, like the geese sort of live around a series of like rain catchments off the barn. And so then they just have access to the water. And so, if you build these water systems that need lots of input, water is very important. The first time you trip up, whether it's you get a flat tire on the way home from a big meat delivery, or I remember a guy I used to follow for years, like he got the flu really bad. Like all of his freaking ducks died, right? Because it was like he couldn't do chores for 2 or 3 days. It's like things can't go in the heat without water, and and it's so just this idea. So if you can, so let's not have watering chores. Let's do things where it's passive watering. I've tapped, nothing's on it right now, but after building 2 swales, I mentioned like different springs have popped up different places, and I have a side hill seep. And so that I went and I put a perforated tile in the side hill seep, and then I ran a tee off of that, and it goes into just a trough. So there's like just animal water trough that like percolates out there 8 or 9 months a year. And like I could have the geese around there, and it would have been dry because we didn't get rain for a while, but now we've had a couple nice rains. I bet you it's trickling again. There's things like that. Like if nothing is done, nothing is undone. And so like, how can you make sure that undone things don't cause you big catastrophes on the farm, and
Sure.
ideas of redundance and all those
Right,
sort
right.
of things.
As we wrap up here, what would you tell people that want to get started? Just to get started.
I think you can do it anywhere. If you have a property, you can obviously start to look at how you can heal some of these cycles. Look at the water. It's going to be your biggest asset. It's going to be your biggest entry point for healing. But that same could be true if you're in your HOA, and how you can maybe fight against regulations like a rain garden or sorts of things, right? Start to bring these pieces of your life into wherever you are. I think all those things are healing to us and give us ideas on how to better grow things. And so if you can do it there, I know several people that have done really well with tree nurseries, and they're because they're just in their small urban lots. But if you're going to be going somewhere, you could start growing trees now, sell them, take them with you to your new property, or even just, take the experience with you to your new place. Right. And then just get out there. Sort of, we are fortunate enough to be able to, jump right into the fire and have a place where we can make mistakes on our own. But if not, just go find places and do the work with people. It's interesting. I've had one kid down the street. Well, one young man, he worked with me for several years, and then sort of just no interest and is off doing his own thing. But he came and did his hourly work, no problem. But and he's a good guy. I like him now as a young adult for sure, and a neighbor. But it's been two others. They're the parents have been oh, my boy just wants to he wants to learn what you're doing. One people, they did terrible grazing with 6 cows and just beat up their pastures forever. And the mom would always tell me come talk to my boy. I'm just if he comes to me once and wants to start talking, we'll start, right? But I'm not going to go looking for him and offering him, hey, come watch me do chores. He could show up on his own when it's in walking distance. And that's just to say, just get out there and get access. I think.
Yep. He knows where I'm at.
Yeah. And so I've had people come and help me plant trees and just chat. And we've always been amenable. A few people that I wish it would have worked out for them to stay longer, and it didn't quite. And someday maybe we'll get into that arrangement. But, there's opportunities out there. I knew I was going to start grazing. So 3 or 4 years before I was really anywhere, I volunteered with a group, and we moved goats around, conservation areas where they were doing buckthorn mitigation and stuff. And so it's got some fence experience with the county conservation board moving goats. There's little opportunities like that.
Yeah.
So just get in there and get experience and see what you like. Start looking for ways. I mean, so many angles where it would behoove them to think about resilience in their life and skills. I don't know where
Yeah.
Whatever
There's plenty of ways that they can get into it. So
just get outside. We didn't even get into sort of talking about more nature connection and those sorts of things, but it's, just getting outside and become grounded, be moved. I think this work is very important. Like I said, we all have interesting opportunities. And so I think there must be so many people out there, if we could really get in touch with kind of their purpose, and however they do that through whatever sort of religious vehicle they are moved by, so many people's purpose must be tied to being on the land, because it's such an important question that's facing us right now. And so just tap into that, and then everybody's going to be moved different ways. And there's lots. We've thought about several people too, other local people to I wish could come and produce here. We've got 50 acres and there's so much. We could have 10. I could have 10 people could have, businesses going off of here. So find other people. Yeah. I know that opens a whole other cans of worms trying to come up with whatever Joel Salatin's fiefdoms with people, but
right.
Just get out there, because start figuring out what works for you and what inspires you.
Well, great. I really appreciate your time and all that I've learned. So I've got for the nature connection, I have a note here that says make time for silence. I really like that one.
Yes. It's been so important for me.
It's actually when you're out in nature, the silence is actually really loud. If you are really listening, you're like, man, it is so noisy out here.
Mm-hmm. So much going on.
Can you tell people where they can find you at?
I'm on Twitter at silvopasturist, and I didn't even really mention our farm is called Three Ridges Ecological Farm, and so it's at threeridges.farm. We're basically at a point now where we're sold out of everything. We're essentially sort of switching to essentially a membership, because it doesn't even feel fair saying that we sell to the public, because we've built such a customer base that we're sold out most things. If you're super local to us, please come check us out. It's not that there's not availability, but yeah, we're in Southwest Ontario, where there's plenty of hungry eaters. So if you're around here, get in touch. People want this food bad for sure. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Drake. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been enjoyable.
I am Matt DeRozier of Farm Hop Life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and visit farmhoplife.com.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started Farm Hop Life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and